Kyle from Andrew Hilton here, and if you haven't noticed, it's way too damn hot outside. Honestly, too hot for a wine tasting, which is why we've pushed it back by 2 full weeks. So we're gonna rectify that, but we have to drink some stuff that drinks when it's hot outside. And we're gonna be going to a country that knows a lot about it being hot outside, and that would be Spain. And believe it or not, they do make white wine in Spain. They make excellent, high acid, fresh, clean, thirst quenching white wine in Spain. We're gonna do 2 of those. One from Alto and one from Lagar Costa. This one is from Rosé. It's an Albariño. I absolutely love this wine. I bought a lot of it. The wine itself rules, and I want to talk a little bit about why this one is so important to me, and we'll discuss a little bit why it maybe didn't sell. Another country that knows a lot about being, hot outside and drop bears and terrifying spiders. We have Australia. From Majella, we have their Melody Rosé here. Majella traditionally makes, big, dry reds in the classic Coonawarra style with lots of eucalypt and mint and, dry, earthy characters. They also make a rosé, and I've been trying to get this for years, and I finally did. We've got about 2 cases left of this out of the 5 cases we actually got our hands on. I set the last 2 cases aside for the tasting because I really want to talk about this wine. And then finally, the Notarpanaro by Taurino. This is by Salento. It's predominantly Negro Amaro. This is a barbecue wine for me. This is brought in my very good friend, Mark Sammer. This is a beautiful, light, elegant, delicate wine. It was the very first wine that I ever really fell in love with here when I first started working here in 2000. This is a wine that for me has a ton of history personally. We featured this, I think, in our 2nd ever online wine tasting. It's a beautiful red wine for a hot summer day, as long as you're serving some big heavy meat with it. Can be served slightly chilled too, so don't be afraid to put this one in the fridge. Lineup this time is $85, and yeah, that'll be coming up Friday, July the 9th at 6 o'clock. I hope you can join us. Hey everybody, welcome to our Friday night wine tasting. As always, I'm Kyle with Andrew Hilton Wine and Spirits, and we have 4 wines in front of us tonight. Before we get wine in our glasses, let me very briefly introduce what we've got here. 2 whites from Spain. Spain, being a very hot country, knows something about making white wines that drink very well at hot temperatures. And they come from very different parts of Spain. We have a Xarel·la, or Xarel·lo, pardon me, or also known as Pansa Blanca from the east coast of Spain, and from the west coast in Rosé, we have an Albariño. From Australia, we have the Majella Melody Rosé, a skin contact Shiraz Rosé. And then finally, from Apulia, in the very... if we're thinking about Italy as a boot, it is literally the heel of the boot. We have a Notarpanaro, which is a Negro Amaro from Salento. But what do all these wines have in common? I think they drink pretty good on a really hot day. Let's jump right into it. We're going to jump right in with the Alto Pansa Blanca or Pansa Bianca? My Spain's a little rusty. Pansa Blanca, apparently. I know it is Xarel·lo. Pansa Blanca is a local name for this grape variety. And when I say local, we are talking about Catalonian Spain. So we are right around Barcelona. Actually, if you go to Alto's website, they very proudly trumpet they are the closest winery to Barcelona. You gotta get those tourist dollars. So predominantly this is a cava or sparkling wine region. And the grapes they use, along with Chardonnay, but they're major grapes that are locally sourced that they use to make cava, are Macabeo primarily, Parellada, which is the most difficult to grow and only grows at extremely high altitudes, and the 3rd grape, Xarel·lo. Now, Xarel·lo is certainly the least grown and least regarded of them. Macabeo is grown in France. It's grown throughout Spain. It's probably the most grown of all of the cava grapes. It's very well regarded. It does a lot of sparkling wine. It's used to make still wines as well. Parellada is kind of the prestige one. It only grows at extremely high altitudes. It's incredibly fussy. Xarel·lo is kind of the one a lot of people don't know about. Actually, when I was doing the research for this, I looked in Jensen Robinson's Oxford Wine Companion. The entire page of the letter X is 1 page. For that, France has, I think, 9 pages unto itself. But the letter X has 1 page with 6 topics, none of which are more than a paragraph. And Xarel·lo is the very first one. And she said it kind of has a unique vegetal note, so we'll keep an eye out for that. So, This is the least expensive wine on the table here. I believe we're selling these for, I think, $18.95. What are we looking for here? We're looking for something bright and fresh and clean, very high acid, but in a very different way than, say, a Portuguese Vinho Verde. Portuguese Vinho Verdes kind of come off like a cold glass of water. They're very, pun intended, they're very green wines. They tend to taste like green plants, green melons like honeydew. They tend to be very, very just sumptuous, succulent wines. Whereas the wines from eastern Spain, which are grown in a much, much hotter climate, these tend to be spicier, still have very, very high acid, but they tend to be dusty, earthy, lemony. They tend to be maybe a little more rustic. And I kind of like that about them. Aaron, should we go to maps? Map number 1. That is not map number 1. That is not map number. That is Italy. Italy and Spain are different things, Aaron. There we go. That looks more like Spain. All right. It's all mine. All right, let's click in here. That looks like I'm in control here. So here is Spain. We are talking about two very different parts of Spain here. There is the city of Barcelona right there, which is it's certainly in a font small enough I can't see. Maybe you can at home. And then we have the broader Catalan region around here. The major region in Catalonia is called Penedeth, and that is the region just down here. Alta Alella is actually not in Penedeth proper. Alta Alella is actually very, very close to the city of Barcelona, just very slightly to the north of the city. They do make a lot of sparkling wine. That was actually the very first ones we brought in from this winery were sparkling. What else you'll tend to find from this region? You'll find a lot of Garnacha. You'll find a lot of Monastrell. Priorat is down here. You tend to find big, chunky, very red berry, red fruit, kind of strawberry lollipop tasting red wines, as well as the very, very serious wines of Priorat. This is not a part of the world that is ever really cold. What kind of gives Penedeth and the broader Catalonian region kind of some interest in the reason that they can actually make table grapes is altitude. It goes from quite literally sea level, because, it's the sea, and then it gets up to really, really high altitudes very, very quickly. In Penedeth, they actually delineate the different altitude levels into 3 subregions, purely based on altitude. If you're high enough, you technically belong to the right subregion, even if you don't touch any other subregion on any of your sides. Uh-oh. We errand. Okay. So yeah, we're... Maybe. There we go. So yeah, here we are in Catalonia. This will be grown probably at a medium height. I don't think this will be grown at the very, very highest level, but this will be certainly well up a mountainside, because the lowest tiers these days are actually mostly used for making, historically they used for making dessert wine. These days they're either used to make table grapes for eating, or they are used to make just kind of like chunky, rustic red wines for tourists, because this part of Spain is really, really popular among tourists. Completely skipping the entire country here, let's go over to Galicia. And in particular, we are over here. Actually, the particular part of Spain we're talking about is right here, the Rías Baixas, particularly the Val de Salnes, which is up here. The Val de Salnes, which is up here. So the Rías Baixas, we are north of Portugal here. Really interesting. We'll dig into this a little bit more. But you notice how a large part of this region just butts right up against the Portuguese border? That's a river valley that actually divides the two countries. The northern part of this is Rías Baixas. The southern bank of this exact same region is actually just Vinho Verde. So really, really interesting. All right, let's dive into the Alta Alella here. End of maps segment 1. And yeah, I agree with you, Don. It's fresh, it's clean, it's bright. I would serve this almost in the same sense that I would serve a Sauvignon Blanc. Certainly in the same place that I would serve like an unoaked Chardonnay or a Pinot Grigio or a Pinot Blanc. But unlike a Pinot Grigio, which tastes kind of apples and lemons and maybe some melons, certainly some pear. And then again, maybe you get a bit of grapefruit on top of that if it's from the right part of Italy. But it's fairly one note. What I like about this is I get all that immediate primary fruit, but because this comes from this particular part of Spain near Barcelona, What I get on the back side is all of the terroir, all of this calcareous soils, and I get this spicy, earthy, cheesy, peppery finish on this wine. It keeps me coming back for another glass and another glass and another glass, just because it's not just one note. This is a very simple wine. Make no mistake about it. This is a wine that is designed for just taking out on the back deck, throwing it in a bucket of ice, 2 ice cubes in your glass, open a book, and try not to get too sunburnt. It's perfect for that. But it actually has a little bit more going on if you do dig into it. Quickly check the text sheet here, see if there's anything I really wanted to cover that I missed. Not really. I will also just mention, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about how this is made in a cooler part of Spain, and that's why the acidity is high. This is made in one of the very hottest parts of Spain, and yet it still has a ton of bright, fresh, crisp acidity. If you try to make Xarel-lo here, like in a colder climate, the grape has so much acidity that you actually need the hot climate to cook the acid down to like a drinkable level. If you tried to make Xarel-lo somewhere more, normally approachable for making wines, it would be so acidic you couldn't drink it. It has to be baked to actually bring the acidity down enough that it'll actually drink. The other trick with this to get that acidity really, really high, like I said, is altitude. You are getting those bakingly hot days, you're getting those very long days, you're getting the shine off the Mediterranean, but you're also getting very, very cold nights because of the altitude, which also helps drive up the acidity. So, not a very expensive wine, probably not a grape variety most people have heard of. We've talked about it a little bit over the last year and change, but it's certainly not something we've ever really focused on as our old friend Xarel-lo. But you know what? It's kind of like Pinot Blanc without all the really pretty charming peaches and sour cream and pretty things up front, but with all of the spicy, chalky, fascinating things that I get out of like good Puy Fumé on the backside. It's a fun wine, and it's a wine that for a hot day you could just pound this. But if you actually take some time and pick it apart, there's a lot to find here too. That's why I think it's kind of interesting and fun. All right, moving on to our second, Albariño. If you watched the promo, this is the one that I think I spent the most time talking about because I really like Albariño. Albariño is predominantly grown in Spain and in Portugal. It's part of the blend for Vinho Verde. It is the major grape of the Rías Baixas region. There is actually 12 different varieties allowed in Rías Baixas for grapes. 90% of Rías Baixas is still Albariño. And this actually comes from a very specific subregion of Rías Baixas, which we will go to maps to learn about. Will. I got Aaron mid-swallow. I was watching just for the right moment. I was actually going to go to maps about 2 minutes from now, but I saw you were just mid-swallow, so I had to get in there. There we go.
Hold on.
Yeah, I got you. I'm not touching the mouse.
Oh, you're not?
No,
Okay.
That's all you, buddy. I was. But if I can play the laptop, I will. We good? I'm good? Okay, let's... Yeah, that's okay. We got this. I got this.
Nice, you got it.
Okay, so here is Rías Baixas, also known as it's part of Galicia in northern Spain. Here is Portugal. That is the Minho River. Condado de Teia and O Rosal, those are two of the subregions of Rías Baixas. Better? Okay.
Grab it and move. That little... Yeah,
That's
okay.
left.
Okay, sorry.
That is left.
Okay, now they can. Everybody.
Now we can see it. Okay, here we go. Let's try that again. So here we are, northern Spain. Here's Portugal. Here's the Atlantic Ocean. We are in the broader province of Galicia, and we are in the Dio Rías Baixas. There are 5 subregions here. Like I said, there are 2 that butt right up here on the Minho River next to Portugal. The south bank is actually Vinho Verde. The north bank is 2 subregions of Rías Baixas, O Rosal and the Condado de Teia. Up here, this is a region I actually know very, very little about. This is Ribera do Ula. I've never had a wine from here. There's Santiago de Compostela, if you're going to do that really famous hike, is right here. But I don't know that much about this part of it. The region I do know a lot about is the Val dos Salnes. This is the heart of this region, and this is where the Lagar de Costa comes from. The heart of this region, again, is actually a little tiny village called Cambados, and this really is, you know, Albariño prime time. This is where this grape comes from, and where it is to this day made best. Now, I spent a lot of time with the last wine talking about how damn hot it is. It's actually not that hot in Rías Bajas. They get about 50 inches of rain per year. It is cold. It is maritime. It's really like more like kind of southern France than is anywhere else in Spain. They get breezes both off the Atlantic Ocean from the west as well as from the north. It tends to be very, very chilly. The grape varieties here, rather than, you know, let's say in Penedeth, we're planting the grape varieties, or pardon me, the grapevines quite far apart, purely so they don't die of thirst. Here, we're actually trellising the vines very, very carefully to keep lots of air movement between the leaves and between the bunches of grapes, so that the vines don't actually rot where they're standing. It's so darn wet. So very, very, very different climate. So out of this cold, lean, rainy part of the world, we would think, okay, well, maybe it's going to be like the Loire Valley. Maybe it's going to be like Germany. Maybe it's going to be like Canada. Well, that's a fair bit warmer than Canada, but you know what I mean. And you're right. This is going to be cleaner, fresher, nippier. It's going to have this certain cucumber and rainwater character, that greenness that I keep talking about with this wine. And I stick my nose in this, and I'm just transported to summer with this. Like I said in the promo, I bought a lot of this wine because when it gets this hot outside, this is exactly what I want. You know, we've talked about this a bit. We've talked about, you know, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. And if you want to crush New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc all day long, you know, all right, Karen, enjoy your Kim Crawford. But this is what I want to drink. This is absolutely beautiful, fresh, clean. This is just me in a glass. I really love this. Yeah, and then you get it in the mouth. There's lemon, a little bit of melon. I get some other citrus foods, probably into lime, maybe into like an underripe pineapple. I get some maybe white peach with that. Absolutely. Second one? You got it. Now, interestingly, I'm not the only person who feels like this. This part of the world is absolutely going gangbusters in terms of production. In 1987, wine production in the Rías Bajas hit its lowest point. There were only 237 hectares planted with grapes. By 2012, it was up to 4,050 hectares. And I did some looking around because that was the most recent number that was published in my version of the Oxford Wine Companion. I did some research. There was actually something that quoted a 2019 vineyard number that was a little closer to 6,000 hectares. And in terms of growth, from like, call it 250 hectares, that's huge. 250 hectares isn't even a rounding error when you start hitting 6,000. That's crazy. And it is going to be, like I said, 90% Albariño. And it's not just here. Like I said, Albariño, very, very common in the Vinho Verde blend in Portugal. You're starting to see it in southern France being planted more and more, particularly around the city of Marseille. You're starting to see it crop up in funny places. There's actually a little bit of Albariño in California. You're starting to see it in Australia and even a little bit in New Zealand. I don't know if we have a long enough growing season to actually ripen it here in Canada, but it wouldn't be impossible, I don't think. But yeah, please do let me know what you think of this one. This is a love letter for me to this grape variety. I brought this in because, to me, this is the perfect summer wine. And I'd love to hear from other people to say, you know what, Kyle, I see what you're talking about. This should be selling better. Or, yeah, you bought way too much, you stupid idiot. Like, this is just trash. Let's just move on to the rosé. I would be very curious. I think part of the reason that Devin and I split on this wine and why it isn't doing quite so well, this showed up in the absolute dead of winter. I think we got this like a week and a half after Christmas, and Devin and I kind of looked at it and said, it's way too cold for this wine right now. Let's just sit on it for a couple, 3 weeks, make sure it's not travel shocked. We got it on the shelf, we tasted it, it was great. But it was, the heart of winter. We both kind of made a mental bookmark that we'd talk about it more in summer. Now here we are, a week into July, and we're just starting to think about it again. Yeah, it's the sort of thing where you just sip it and you say, ah. And mine's have been out of the fridge now for about half an hour. I take the wines out about 10 minutes before we start the cameras running. I think I'd almost like that even a point colder. It's lovely a little warmer, but I would even be fine with it a little colder. All right, let's jump on to wine number 3. No maps for this one. Why? Because it's an Australian wine and the maps don't matter. That's perhaps a little bit mean-spirited and a little bit untrue, but it's not that untrue. With this Riojas Bejas wine, we can say, well, it comes from Spain, it comes from Riojas Bejas, it comes from Valdesaldas, it comes from the town of Cambados. Well, we basically are down to a village. With it's like, okay, this comes from Australia, this comes from the region of Coonawarra. That's as far as we can really go. And Coonawarra is a big place. Coonawarra is something like 160 kilometers long. Like, it's not a small region. So Majella is made by the Lin family, and I'm going to be saying the words Lin and Win, and I'm going to get them mixed up, so do forgive me. The Lin family is now on the 4th generation. They started out as lamb farmers and wool growers. So they basically were running this lovely ranch full of sheep, and they decided in about the 1970s that they were going to start growing some grapes. They had this beautiful red soil bench kind of on one side of their ranch, and they said, you know what? We should try planting grapes. Everybody else in Australia seems to be getting into this grape growing fad. Let's go for it. They started growing grapes. They didn't start making their own wine until the early 1990s. But for about 20 years there, they decided we're going to make some grapes and they're going to sell them to Wynn's Coonawarra, which is by far the largest Coonawarra estate. Make a lot of really interesting Cabernet Sauvignon. Also was the exclusive wine for Disney for a long time. Wynn's Coonawarra Cab was only, we sold, so this is a story from about 10, 12 years ago. We sold absolute piles of Wynn's Coonawarra Cab for years and years and years and years and years, and then it disappeared from the market, and nobody would tell us why. It turns out that they signed an exclusive agreement with the Disney company, back before Disney owned all media, and apparently it was like the only red wine. It was the house red wine being served on Disney cruises. That was about the same time that a few select locations in Disney resorts started having alcohol licenses. So it was the only Australian red wine you find on Disney resorts. So yeah, we literally lost Wynn's Coonawarra Cab. Might have also been the Cab Merlot, I can't remember, but I think it was a straight cab to Disney for 2 years. Yeah, it was fun. Oh, right around 2010, I'd say. 2010, 2012. Yeah. Okay. So the Lin family here, who own Majella, sold their grapes for about 20 years to the Wynn's Winery, and then in the early 1990s, I believe 1992, they started actually making their own wines. Best known in southern Alberta for their Musician blend, which is their Cab Shiraz, which sells for about $20, $25. They also have the Majella Estate wines, which are around the $37 to $30 mark. I don't have any of them right now. We bring them in now and again. $35 is a really weird price point. It's not spendy enough to be impressive, but it's not cheap enough to be everyday wine. So it kind of fits in this weird price bracket where nobody buys it. It's either too expensive or not expensive enough. So we've kind of backed off on some of their high-end wines, but the Musician sells like anything. And the Melody is very much a Australian sort of wine. I can see you lurking, Mark. Which one or two? You're on the Rosé, sure. Yep. So what is Melody? Well, this is the one I've been trying to get for quite a few years. I wanted to have something in an Australian rosé that was not desperately expensive. As much as, Australia makes a lot of wine, so much wine and so much bulk wine, they're relative newcomers to the rosé industry. And the reason why is kind of funny. So in the early 1980s, California was starting to run itself into a little bit of a bulk wine problem. Their plantings and their production had rather overrun consumption. And so they had a need to get rid of excess production. So what did they do with it? They invented white Zinfandel, which, okay, yes, it was 75% Zinfandel by law. Under American law, if you put the word Zin on the label, it has to be 75% Zin. But they could put anything in that. Like, you had extra Riesling, you had extra Cabernet, you had extra Chardonnay, you had extra anything. You could just throw it in there as long as it didn't hit, 26%. It was still Zinfandel. And so the United States solved its bulk wine overflow problem by making cheap, sweet rosé, and in so doing, built themselves a little bit of a inbred know-how of how to make rosé. The Australians didn't. This is a story I've heard from my dad. He was actually staying at Best's Winery, and I would say this would be the very early 2000s, 2001, 2002 probably. And they had this big metal tank, probably like a 500-liter fermenter, basically just sitting outside. And every so often, a farmer would show up and he'd throw some cash in a bucket next to the fermenter, and he'd fill himself a 4-liter milk jug full of wine, and he'd drive away. And I was like, what the hell is that? He's like, oh, that's just like basically cheap sherry or cheap sweet wine that we make for the local farmers. They pay us $10 for a 4-liter, and they go on their way, and that's kind of what they do with it. The Australians actually got rid of their bulk wine, not by making inexpensive sweet rosé. They did it by basically making inexpensive fortified wines like muscats, ports, sherries. Legally they aren't ports or sherries because they're not from Portugal or Spain, but that style of wine. So they had this really strong fortified tradition, but they really didn't have a rosé tradition. So very often we struggle to find Australian rosés. This one is 100% Shiraz, 12.5% alcohol. And it's so different from a European rosé because European rosés are so light and fragrant and fresh. And I love how lifted they are. This drink's more like a light red. They say this is a lovely wine for a light lunch. I say this is almost in place of a lunch. It's got so much weight to it. Unapologetically, this is Shiraz. It's big, it's chunky, it's weighty. It actually drinks bigger than 12.5% alcohol. It's got a little bit of residual sweetness to it. You would never mistake this for Provence rosé or a German Pinot Noir rosé. This, you can tell, is from the New World, and you get this wonderful ripe strawberry thing. Not so much immediately in your mouth, although you do get a little bit then. You get much more of it kind of about 10 seconds after you swallow. The strawberries just come back to haunt your mouth, and I really like that experience with this wine. I will say I think their artistry of putting a rose on the rosé is literally the laziest packaging I've ever seen in 21 years of working in the wine industry. Honestly, it's a rosé and you put a rose on it. Oh, that took 5 seconds. Well done, lads. But no, I do like how unapologetically Australian this is. And I also want to make a point. We've tasted a lot of old world rosés on this. We've had rosé from Spain, France, Italy. I think we've even had a Portuguese one. We've had them from all over. We've had some stuff from the United States. We've had rosé from Austria-Hungary. We've had a rosé from a lot of places. I find that New World rosé is so different from Old World, where it doesn't have that sparkling right up front acidity. It doesn't have that incredible crispness. It doesn't have that incredible bite. This is very much more like a light red. This drinks like a Shiraz, dialed down to half volume. I don't know. It's not my style of rosé, but I don't think that I should talk about it as a pure rosé. I don't think you can really compare this to European rosés. I would talk about this against American or South American or maybe South African rosés. But I can't really say you couldn't put this and a Provence rosé on the same table and say, oh yeah, same thing. They're not. They're very, very different from each other. By all means, Nigel. Welcome. You get pencil eraser? Like rubberiness? I could see rubber with that. Absolutely, yes. You know, I wouldn't have picked that up until you said it, but yeah, like the petroleum character of a Riesling. That's brilliant. You're absolutely right. I picked up the strawberry first, but yeah, there's a rubbery Riesling thing. And yeah, rosé really is a broad category. And I know you're leading me into an answer, Devin, but yeah, I mean, there's 4 major ways to make a rosé, between skin contact, using a teinturier, the Saignée method, literally just blending red and white together. There's lots of ways to make a rosé. They make it all over the world. They all have their own traditions. They're all very different from each other. And you're right, it's a huge category. There's no such thing as just, this is a rosé, you know? No, I think that's very interesting. Okay, let's briefly talk about what we are doing on Friday night. We're going to take another 2-week break from wine tasting. We'll get back to you in about 2 weeks here. When are we getting back to you? Well, that's a point of contention between Aaron and I, because Aaron wants a day off. So, what a wiener. That's okay, though. Next Wednesday, we are doing the beers of Omnipollo. Now, Omnipollo are brewers out of Sweden. And they don't really have their own brewery. They tend to hop brewery to brewery, doing something a little different every single place they go. We have 2 of their core beers, the Zodiac IPA, which is kind of a Swedish New England India Pale Ale, a giant word salad full of location names. But it's brewed in Toronto at Brunswick Beer Works. Actually, all these beers were, but this was very first brewed at Brunswick. Then we have Maz, which is their Oat Pale Ale. This is one of their core beers that's been around forever. And then finally, we have Blanca, which is their Mango Lassi Goza. So a little bit of a sour. There's only 3 Omnipollo beers in Alberta right now, so we are going to, round that out with just a familiar old friend in Driftwood Brewing. And this is their brand new Viewpoint? Viewfield. Knew it was a Brett Saison. Couldn't remember the name of the damn thing. Viewfield Brett Saison. So this is a Saison with raw wheat and barley malt, done with Brettanomyces. So it's got a little bit of a funky, earthy character, kind of like Alambic, but just not nearly that sour. Really, really cool. Nice to see some Brett beers in cans, too. I think that's fun. So that's coming up Wednesday. I'm hoping, depending on how everybody's timelines work out, to actually have Daryl from Lanigan Edwards Wines as our guest for the next wine tasting. The problem is that he and Aaron are only available on opposite days, so we will work on that. It might just end up being me, and that'd be fine. Who doesn't like me? Aaron, you are remaining very quiet, Aaron. That's fine. Let's move on. Do actually want to talk about something fun here. So I open the wines before all of these and taste them before every single tasting, just in case one of the wines is corked. Do I remember to chill a second bottle of the whites in case one of the white wines is corked? No, because I'm too lazy. But I do actually taste them before the tasting to make sure that nothing is corked. And through like 15 months of doing these, I've been very, very lucky. I've never had a corked bottle until today. My bottle of Notarpanaro, my first one, was very, very slightly corked. And it completely changed the dynamic of the wine. Rather than having, lots of primary fruit, despite being a 2012, it just tasted kind of like a damp, musty, mushroomy basement, and it was not very pleasant. Which is a shame, because this is one of the wines that I think the wine I have the longest relationship with in this store. The only other wine that would kind of give this a run for its money would be the Santa Rita Medalla Real Cabernet. And I learned to like that about 3 years after I really learned to love this, so it doesn't quite count. I was still in high school when I first started liking Notarpanaro. I can remember drinking this wine at like 18 in my best friend at the time's like parents' living room out of these god-awful like weird cut glass 1970s, 1960s wine glasses, and being really impressed with it even back then. This is a wine that, to me, really typifies why Italy... I can keep going back to the Italian well for years. I could almost do a tasting series like this every week for 52 weeks just on Italy, and maybe I'd get through everything. Italy's fascinating, and for that, we're going to go to maps.
Are we now?
We are. I didn't quite get to mid-swallow, and that's a shame. So, welcome to Italy. So let's kind of run through the highlights. Here's Tuscany. Everyone likes Tuscany. Here's Veneto, way up here in the north. So, you know, the city of Venice. Wow, they really cut off a lot of northern Italy here. That's fine. But we are way down here. We're down here in Puglia. What's that?
Scroll
Down some more.
keep
Like
going.
that,
Yep,
that,
keep going.
that,
There you go.
that. There we
Up
go.
a little more.
Yeah.
A little more.
Okay. Here we are in Puglia. Here we are in Puglia, down in the heel of Italy. And specifically, if we're talking about Salento, we are way down here near Taranto, Brindisi, and Lecce. We are way down here in the actual heel itself, and this is the home of Negro Amaro. Negro Amaro quite literally means black, bitter, which is ironic because it's not a particularly dark grape, nor is it a particularly tannic grape. It tends to be actually fairly pale and fairly lovely. I'm told, now this is a 2011 actually, I was going to say 2012. So this is a 10-year-old wine. It has obviously had quite a bit of time to mellow. I'm told even young, Negro Amaro is not that fiery. It's actually just fine. Now, Puglia is a very interesting part of Italy for a couple of reasons. One, the quality here is, with some exceptions like the wine in our glasses, the quality here sucks. This is very, very much the bulk production prime time of Italy. You are Jim Bob's restaurant chain. You have 15 restaurants in your chain. You want to open a line of spaghetti and pizza and steak houses, and you want to have your own Italian red wine brand made just for you. You are going to order bulk wine out of Italy, have your own really tacky label with like a bird eating a pizza or something on it, and you're going to, you know, sell it in your restaurants for way too much money. Most likely, your white is going to come from Sicily, and your red is going to come from Puglia. And the reason is this is where so much of that type of winemaking is done. Yes, the traditional grapes of this part of the world are Primitivo and Malvasia Nera and Negro Amaro, but there's a lot of Chardonnay here. There's a lot of Cabernet and Merlot and Shiraz, and there's actually a lot of Spanish grape varieties here. There's a lot of Monastrella and Tempranillo grown here, purely because it's cheap land, and if they think they can sell it and grow it in Italy, they'll sell it and grow it in Italy. People like Italian Sangiovese because it's the same grape as Chianti. Does it grow in Puglia? I mean, not well, but there's quite a lot of it here. Ditto Trebbiano. I mean, this is not one of the good strains of Trebbiano. This is good old-fashioned Trebbiano Toscana, the worst Trebbiano. And there's loads of it here because, again, they're making it for grocery store brands. Trader Jim's Italian Trebbiano, you know, like that sort of thing. It's not great, which is a shame because this part of Italy deserves a lot of respect, and this is a wine that we've been carrying in the store, brought in by the Banff Wine Store, which is my friend Mark Sommer for probably like 30 years now. I absolutely love this. Actually, this is a wine, fun story. I still had to order this wine by fax up until like 5 years ago. This was literally the only reason we still had a fax machine 5 years ago, was just for this wine. Now it's just to get orders in the Twin Butte General Store. But yeah, this is a wine I literally had to order by fax. There was no email, there was no phone, there was only fax for this. But yeah, I love this wine. It's so gentle, it's so pretty. Why are we tasting this? Because it, like on our hot weather day, because it's so pale and you can have it with barbecue. Imagine this with like smoked ribs. Imagine this with like roasted chicken kebabs. Imagine this with, you know, just a whole big mess of like pork chops off the barbecue. It'll do all of those things. It's way too hot, throw ice in this. This wine would be fine with that. It's a lovely, delicate, ruby-colored wine that just is so pretty and so lovely. It is a showstopper at a dinner party. Like if you bring this out with a main course, people are gonna think you spent more than 25 bucks on this. You bring this out at a barbecue and just pour it around the table, everybody's gonna like it. I like this as a hot weather red. This was a bit of a controversial choice. This was the one that Dev and I kind of went back and forth on the most, but I do really like it. This is one that I have a long history with and I thoroughly, thoroughly enjoy. Well, we burned through that quickly, Mr. Trozo.
Good.
But we had no questions, and we had a fairly low viewership because it's the hot weekend of Street Wheelers,
Yes.
which is why we're doing every other week.
Rule.
Well, the diehards are amazing.
Out there.
Yeah. Well, we could do this on the patio very easily. My patio out in the sun.
Who's got a patio? It's a patio call out.
Yeah, it's a patio call out. We're gonna come steal your patio.
Yeah.
We need really fast internet.
By the next round of wine, you'll get into a spa.
Yeah. Well, we'll just promo the tasting. You can be a guest host. We'll just do it from your patio.
There you go.
Be a lot of fun. And I'm dead serious, by the way. If you want to get on that, send us a Facebook message.
Absolutely.
You can guest host. I'm doing this purely because we have 5 viewers. But if you want to be a guest host, you want to shoot it on your own back patio, we'll come to you. You'll get the wine tasting for free. We'll even bring a couple extra bottles for laughs. But yeah, that's gonna be fun. Well, you know what, Don? I'm gonna do these no matter what because I like doing them, and maybe they're not gonna sell very well over the summer. But if I stop doing them just because we have low turnout, then the series is over. It hasn't continued. And I want it to come back in the fall. I really do. So, you know what? Even if we have 5 people watching, that's fine. That's 5 cool people.
And live there forever.
I mean, we've already had Craig co-host once. Having Deirdre as co-host? That'd be fun. Just so I can keep calling her Deirdre. Which is not how she pronounces it at all. Actually, I'm curious what you think of this wine, Aaron, because this is a wine that's very near and dear to my heart. So if you hate it, I want to know. And by no means, Karen, am I saying like this is going to stop, this is going to end. We're going to bring this back in fall, and it's going to continue. It's just this slowed down a lot last summer too. Even with the lockdown continuing last summer, this got real sluggish. We went to every other week, every 3rd week last summer too, because even then people could go hiking, camping, doing socially isolated activities. This definitely was a thing that we cut down last time too. I'm not saying this is going to stop. We're going to keep on running. We just gotta run through some empty old houses for the months of July and August, and you know what? That's fine. I'm having a lot of fun. Yeah, by all means. Yeah, it is kind of salty, isn't it? And it's a wine that changes a lot year to year. It can be very, very tight and not very giving, and it can be very, very generous and have a lot of fruit. I think this is actually a more perfumey, delicate sort of year. I get a lot of like roses on this. Oh, like 08. Yeah, this is a wine that tends to come out very old. It's on 11. I thought it was a 12, but no. And this is current release. Like I haven't been sitting on this for 6 months. We got this like 3 weeks ago. This is a wine that just comes out really, really old. Question was, does it age well or is it just better, more mature? This is one that just comes out. Both, in a certain sense. It does age well, but it doesn't age long term. This is about as old as you'd want it. But because Taurino is just one of those wineries that says, you should drink this at about 10 years old, therefore we're going to release it at 10 years old at a grocery store price at $25, where most people aren't going to take it home and age it. Anybody who opens it and drinks this and says, wow, that's got another 10 years in it, they're very stupid. So no, it's kind of released ready to drink. So that's just part of what it does. Yeah, it's elegant. It's pretty. Who doesn't like this? Yeah, for Mark? Yeah, of course. Aaron's getting the drama shot of the wine.
Yeah, I like the drama.
There you go. Okay, wow, rankings. Where the hell do I go with ranking these? Okay, the melody's gonna be last. Compared to everything else on the table, it comes off clumsy. Like, it's a cool wine, but it comes off a little clumsy. The Albariño is 1 for me. That shouldn't surprise anyone here. This is 4th. Two seconds here. It's probably the heat. 1, 2, 3, 4 for me. So I'm going 2-1-4-3. Everybody else? Aaron, do you have a ranking for me? Mm-hmm. But
2-1-4-3.
2-1-4-3.
Same.
We're in concert. If only we could agree about the laptop. Although I will say, the Lappy did better today. The Lappy had a much better night. It didn't vomit over everything, which is nice.
Hiccups,
But not on my side. My side was great. Yeah.
no.
Just tech. Fine. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Really appreciate your time this evening. I had a lot of fun drinking these wines. I hope everyone learned something about Albariño, a little bit about, you know, the three major grapes of eastern Spain, and Parellada, Xarel·lo, and Macabeo. You heard me kind of awkwardly talk about New World Rosé in a way that made it sound like New World Rosé was kind of my thing, when it's really not. I like European Rosé. And listen to my horribly sappy teenage poetry about Notarpanaro and how much I love it. So thank you all very much for joining us for that. And if we're very lucky, you will join us in Monday night for Omnipolo, and in a couple 3 weeks, depending on Aaron and Daryl's schedules for the next wine tasting, which is going to be really rosé heavy, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Good night, everybody. Thanks so much.